Imagine, for just a second, you're looking at a map of the United States. But I want you to erase the solid borders you're used to seeing. Instead, just picture a jagged, burning line tearing right down the middle of the continent. We aren't talking about an invasion from a foreign power. We aren't talking about a massive earthquake or some kind of natural disaster. No, we are talking about an existential crisis where the country simply decided it could not live with itself anymore.
It's the moment where the American experiment almost failed.
Yeah.
And I don't mean failed in a metaphorical sense. I mean it almost stopped existing.
Right.
The casualty count is something we still, even today, have trouble wrapping our heads around. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dead, entire cities just reduced to ash, a social fabric that was completely and utterly shredded.
And standing right in the middle of this absolute inferno is our protagonist. And here's the thing. If you were casting a movie about the savior of a nation, you would never, ever pick this guy.
Yeah, not a chance.
He's not a general. He's not some rich aristocrat. He's a lawyer from the middle of nowhere who, quite frankly, lost way more elections than he ever won.
He was the ultimate underdog. Poor, kind of ungainly, prone to these deep, deep bouts of melancholy and lacking any formal military training whatsoever. Yet this is the man. This is the one who held the Union together when every single force of history was trying to rip it apart.
So today we are going on a deep dive into the real story of Abraham Lincoln. We are going to strip away the marble statue, the face on the penny, the iconic top hat, and we are going to look at the human being underneath.
Yes.
We want to understand the man who made these impossible decisions, and maybe more importantly, we're on a mission to understand why his story still fundamentally shapes Western democracy today.
And to do that, you really have to look at the why. Why did he make the choices he made? Why did he suffer the way he did? I mean, this isn't just a biography. It's a look at leadership under the most extreme pressure imaginable.
So let's unpack this. We've got a stack of sources here. Histories, letters, political analyses, and we need to start at the absolute bottom. And when I say bottom, I mean the dirt floor. Take us back to 1809.
Hardin County, Kentucky, February 12th, 1809. I really want you to visualize this setting, because it is absolutely crucial to understanding the man. We were talking about a one-room log cabin.
Okay.
And when I say cabin, please don't think of a cozy vacation rental with a fireplace and a bare rug. Think of a rough-hewn structure, maybe 16 by 18 feet.
And the floor. I mean, you said dirt floor.
It's dirt, packed earth. That's it. There's no glass in the windows, just animal skins or maybe grease paper if they were lucky. But mostly it's just open shutters.
Wow.
No plumbing, of course. In the winter, the wind just howls through the chinking in the logs. It was brutally, brutally cold.
It's proper frontier life. This isn't the settled East Coast with, cobblestone streets and established town.
Oh, far from it. This is the edge of civilization. The land is wild, the population is incredibly sparse, and it's all subsistence living.
Meaning you eat what you grow.
You eat what you kill or what you grow. If the crop fails, you don't eat. It's that simple. His father, Thomas Lincoln, was a carpenter and a farmer, but, well, he wasn't particularly successful at the farming part.
Right. The sources we have paint Thomas as a bit of a wanderer, right? Always moving.
He was restless. They were constantly on the move, from Kentucky, then to Indiana, then on to Illinois, always chasing a better patch of dirt, always trying to outrun poverty.
But poverty was faster.
Poverty was faster. Exactly.
That instability, I mean, that has to do something to a kid. You're never settled. You're always
hungry. It creates this profound sense of insecurity. But the physical hardship, the cold, the hunger, that was nothing compared to the emotional trauma that hit when he was just 9 years old.
Okay.
This is the moment that shapes him. His mother, Nancy Hanks Lincoln, she contracted milk sickness.
Milk sickness. It sounds almost harmless today, like a lactose intolerance or something. But back then,
it was a death sentence. It's caused by cows eating white snake root, which is a poisonous plant that grows in the shade out on the frontier. The toxin, trematol, it gets into the milk. When humans drink it, my God, it is a horrific way to die.
What are we talking about here? Is it a fever?
It's tremors, violent vomiting, the sensation of your blood literally boiling in your veins, intense pain, and this very distinct, sickly, sweet odor on the breath.
And Lincoln watched this happen.
He watched his mother die of this. It took days. And here is a detail that really, really sticks with you, one that just gives you a glimpse into the trauma. At 9 years old, Abraham helped his father carve the pegs for her coffin.
Jesus.
And he helped dig her grave.
9 years old, standing in the dirt, digging a hole for your own mom. That's heavy. That's the kind of trauma that just rewires a brain.
It planted a seed of deep sadness in him. Throughout his life, people who knew him best commented on his melancholy. He carried a visible weight. He didn't just get over it.
How could you?
But there was a glimmer of light in this early darkness. About a year later, his father remarries a widow named Sarah Bush Johnston.
And usually in these old stories, especially the fairy tales from the 1800s, the stepmother is the villain. But here, it's the opposite.
Completely the opposite. And thank goodness for that, because she might have saved him. Sarah recognized something in Abraham that his own father didn't. Thomas Lincoln thought reading was a total waste of time.
Right, he was a practical man.
A practical, physical man who wanted his son to work the fields. He actually treated Abraham's reading as a sign of laziness.
Put down the book and pick up the axe, that kind of thing.
Exactly. But Sarah saw this spark of intellect. She brought books into the cabin. She defended his right to read. She insisted that he get whatever schooling was available. She became one of the most important figures in his development. She essentially saved his mind.
Which leads us to maybe the most shocking stat in our notes today, because we think of Lincoln as this intellectual giant, this master of the English language. But if you actually tally up his formal education...
It's less than 1 year. Total. All told.
Okay, I need to wrap my head around this. Because we aren't talking about a guy who just learned to read enough to sign his name. We're talking about the guy who wrote the second inaugural address. How do you go from a dirt floor with no teachers to writing arguably the best prose in American history?
You do it by being annoying.
Laughs what?
Seriously. He was relentless. He became an autodidact, self-taught in the truest sense of the word. On the frontier, you have to understand, books were as rare as gold.
Right, there's no public library down the road.
No. Lincoln would walk miles, literally miles through the woods, just to borrow a single book.
So he's just showing up at neighbors' houses, cap in hand?
If he heard a farmer 10 miles away had a copy of, say, The Life of Washington, Lincoln would walk the 10 miles, knock on the door, and basically beg to borrow it.
Wow.
He read the Bible, cover to cover. He read Shakespeare. And he read Blackstone's commentaries.
Blackstone's, that's the big book on law, right?
That is the foundational text of English law. So imagine a teenager in a log cabin by firelight trying to decode complex legal theory while his family sleeps. That was Lincoln.
That's incredible discipline.
But here's the part that I think really explains the genius tag. It wasn't just input, it was the output.
What do you mean by that?
He practiced. He would go out into the woods all by himself, stand on a tree stump, and deliver speeches to the forest. He would practice his cadence, his volume, his pauses.
So if I'm walking through the woods in Indiana in, 1825, I might just stumble upon a teenage Abe Lincoln screaming at a maple tree.
You might. And he wasn't just screaming, he was refining. He would take these complex ideas he'd read in Blackstone's, and he would try to rewrite them in language that a neighbor farmer could understand. He was practicing the art of translation.
That's a secret sauce, because
Yeah.
later in life, that's his superpower, isn't it? Taking these high-level constitutional concepts and explaining them to regular people in a way that just lands.
That's it. He wasn't born with that. He built it hour by hour, talking to trees.
So he pulls himself out of the woods. He moves to New Salem, Illinois. He eventually becomes a lawyer. And this is where the Honest Abe brand starts to emerge. Is that just, good marketing, or was he actually that guy?
No, it wasn't just marketing. The sources are just full of these anecdotes. There's the famous one where he realized he'd overcharged a client, or maybe shortchanged a customer by a few cents, and he walked for miles to return the money.
Right.
But more importantly, as a lawyer, he would refuse cases he thought were unjust.
That's rare. I mean, usually a lawyer takes the money and makes the best argument they can.
Not Lincoln.
Yeah.
If he thought a client was guilty or lying, he'd apparently say, I cannot represent you, because the whole time I'm talking to the jury, I'll be thinking, Lincoln, you are a liar, and I'll forget my lines.
Huh.
He built this reputation on integrity in a profession that, well, let's just say lawyers didn't always have that reputation, even back then.
And we have to talk about the look, because when he walks into a courtroom, he's not exactly blending in.
He is a giant, 6'4". In the 1800s, that is absolutely enormous. The average height for a man was much, much shorter back then.
And he's gangly.
Very. He's
Yeah.
thin, gangly, with this angular face and deep lines just etched into his skin. He looked awkward. His clothes rarely fit him right. The sleeves were always too short, showing his bony wrists.
But he knew how to use it, didn't he?
Oh, he was a master of it. He was a storyteller. He'd tell jokes, often self-deprecating ones. To completely disarm people, he'd start a speech by making fun of his own looks. It made him seem accessible.
Yeah.
And speaking of his looks, there's a great story about his beard.
Oh, the Grace Bedell story. I love this. It's so
Yeah.
wholesome amidst all the grim history that's coming up.
It is genuinely charming. He receives a letter from an 11-year-old girl named Grace Bedell, and she basically tells him, "You have a very thin face. All the ladies like whiskers. If you grow a beard, my brothers will vote for you, and you'll look a whole lot better."
Fix your face, Mr. Lincoln.
From a child, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And the amazing part is he listened. He grew the iconic beard because an 11-year-old girl told him to. It just shows this lack of vanity and a willingness to listen that is pretty rare, especially in politics.
So he's building this career, but let's pivot to his personal life. Because he meets Mary Todd, and on paper, this pairing makes zero sense.
It is the ultimate mismatch. Mary Todd is from a wealthy, slave-holding, politically connected banking family in Kentucky. She's educated, she speaks French, she's fiery, politically astute, she wears the finest dresses.
And Lincoln is?
Well, he's the guy from the dirt floor cabin with the pants that are too short.
So why do they work? Or, I mean, do they work? It seems like it was a very tumultuous relationship.
They worked because they are an intellectual match. Mary was intensely ambitious. Some historians argue she saw the potential in him even before he saw it in himself. She famously said she intended to marry a man who would one day be president.
So she was betting on the dark horse.
A very dark horse.
Yeah.
And she was effectively his political advisor. She was sharp, she understood the players, and she pushed him.
But their home life wasn't exactly a picnic. It was haunted. We talked about his mother dying, but the grief didn't stop there, did it?
No, they lost children. And we need to understand that in the 19th century, child mortality was much higher, but it didn't make it hurt any less. Their son Eddie died at 3. And later, Willie died at 11, right in the White House during the war.
Unimaginable. And there's also the shadow of Anne Rutledge.
Right.
An earlier love.
Yes, a rumored early love of Lincoln's who died young, probably of typhoid. Whether the romance was as legendary as the myths say, the grief was real. And all this just compounded his natural melancholy.
It's what we would now call clinical depression.
Without a doubt. There were days he couldn't get out of bed. There were times his friends literally removed razors from his room because they were afraid he would harm himself.
And yet he kept going. And that resilience, that just, I don't know, sheer stubbornness, it shows up in his political career too. Because for a guy we call a great winner, he did a lot of losing.
A staggering amount of losing. It's actually kind of painful to look at his resume before 1860. He lost a bid for the state legislature early on. He lost a bid for Congress later. He ran for the Senate in 1854 and lost. He ran for the vice presidential nomination in 1856 and lost. And then, of course, the big one, he ran against Stephen Douglas for the Senate in 1858 and lost that too.
If I lost that many times, I'd probably just go back to being a lawyer, make some money, and call it a day. Why didn't he? What kept him in the ring?
Because the issue at hand became too big to ignore. Lincoln used every failure to refine his argument. He treated debates and losses as a testing ground for his ideas. He wasn't just running for power anymore. By the end, he was running for a cause.
Which brings us to the big one, the debates with Douglas. This is really where the country starts to crack open.
The Lincoln-Douglas debates of 1858. This is the main event. And you have to imagine the scene. We're talking thousands of people standing in open fields for hours listening to these two men speak. No microphones, just booming voices carrying over the crowd.
And the core conflict is slavery. But it's nuanced, right? It's not just for or against.
Right. The specific question was about the expansion of slavery into the new Western territories. It wasn't just a moral debate. It was about power. It was about territory.
The balance of power in Congress.
Precisely. Stephen Douglas argued for popular sovereignty. Let the new states vote on whether they want slavery or not. Sounds democratic, right?
Sure, let the people decide. It's a catchy slogan. It sounds fair on the surface.
But Lincoln cut right through that. He anchored his entire argument in the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. He argued that you cannot have a moral wrong, which is what he called slavery, and vote to make it right. You can't vote to strip humanity from another human being.
And this leads to the House divided speech.
A house divided against itself cannot stand. He was making a truly radical claim for the time. He was saying the status quo, this delicate, teetering balance of free states and slave states that politicians had been carefully maintaining for decades, was doomed. He said, I do not expect the Union to be dissolved. I do not expect the House to fall, but I do expect it will cease to be divided. It will become all one thing or all the other.
That must have terrified people. He's basically saying, pick a side, because the middle ground is evaporating.
It was electric. It polarized the nation. And, he lost that Senate seat to Douglas, but in a way, he won the moral argument. The transcripts of those debates were published nationally in newspapers. Suddenly, the frontier lawyer from Illinois was a national figure.
And that sets the stage for 1860, the presidential election that breaks the camel's back.
It's a four-way race. The country is so fractured that the Democratic Party literally splits in two. And Lincoln wins the presidency with less than 40% of the popular vote.
Less than 40%.
And he didn't even appear on the ballot in most southern states.
Think about that for a second. He becomes president of the United States without a single vote from an entire region of the country. They literally didn't even let people vote for him there.
And the reaction is immediate. It is swift, and it is decisive. Before he's even inaugurated, South Carolina secedes. They're out. They leave the Union.
Just like that.
Other states follow. The Confederate States of America is formed. Lincoln has to arrive in Washington in disguise because of credible assassination threats against him.
Talk about a rough first day at the office.
The country is falling apart before he even walks into the White House. And he makes a decision here, a fundamental decision that changes history. He could have said, okay, you guys want to leave? Go ahead. Good riddance. We don't want the headache.
And honestly, a lot of people in the North probably would have supported that. Let them go. Avoid a war.
Many, many people wanted him to do just that. Avoid the bloodshed at all costs.
But Lincoln decided that the Union was permanent. He decided that democracy was not a suicide pact where you can just opt out when you lose an election. He drew a line in the sand. No walking away. And then, April 1861, Fort Sumter.
The first shots. The Confederates bombard the Union fort in Charleston Harbor. And here is the great, tragic miscalculation. Both sides thought this would be a quick affair.
Right, a 90-day war.
A few battles, a little bit of glory, and it will all be over by Christmas.
Instead, it becomes a meat grinder.
And the first year is an absolute disaster for Lincoln. His generals are incompetent, they are slow, they are timid, they're suffering from these delusions of grandeur. The Union armies are getting humiliated on the battlefield at places like Bull Run. And personally, this is when Willie dies.
Let's just pause on that. He's in the White House. The South is winning the war. The press hates him. His generals are failing him. And his 11-year-old son dies. In the house.
The stress is unimaginable. He was working while grieving, walking the halls at night. He effectively had to hold the government together while his own personal world was completely collapsing.
Okay, let's pause the battlefield stuff for a second and do a real deep dive into something that often gets skipped in history class. The money. Because wars are unbelievably expensive, and the Union was basically broke.
This is one of those aha moments in the story. The Union government did not have the mechanism to fund a war of this scale. They were terrified of bankruptcy. Gold reserves were draining out of the treasury. Investors, both domestic and foreign, were panicking.
So if you run out of gold, you can't pay the soldiers. If you can't pay the soldiers, they go home. War over. You lose.
Exactly. So Lincoln and his Treasury Secretary, a man named Salmon P. Chase, they completely revolutionized the American economy out of sheer necessity. First, they introduced the first federal income tax.
Everyone's favorite annual tradition brought to you by the Civil War.
Then they introduced war bonds, selling debt directly to common citizens. But the big one, the real game changer, the greenback.
We hear this term, but what is the greenback, really? Break that down. It's fiat currency. It's money not backed by gold or silver. Before this, paper money was just a claim check. You could take a $10 bill to a bank and trade it for $10 worth of gold. But they were running out of gold. So they just started printing money backed by nothing but the full faith and credit, the promise of the United States government.
That sounds incredibly risky. I mean, it's like saying, here's a piece of paper, just trust us, it's worth money.
It was wildly risky. It was arguably unconstitutional at the time. Wall Street hated it. They called it shin plaster. But it worked. It created a unified currency system and fundamentally changed how finance works in this country. It allowed the Union to buy guns, ships, uniforms, and food. It's the precursor to the Federal Reserve System we have today.
So while he's fighting Robert E. Lee, he's also reinventing the U.S. dollar. Now, let's talk about the other massive strategic shift, the Emancipation Proclamation. We tend to think of this as this purely moral act, Lincoln freeing the slaves because it was the right thing to do. But you're saying there's a lot of hard-nosed strategy here, too. It's a brilliant mix of high morality and ruthless, hard-nosed strategy. You have to look at the international map. The South was selling its cotton to Britain and France. The entire Confederate strategy was, we have the cotton, Europe needs the cotton, so eventually Europe will come help us fight the North.
Just like how France helped the American colonies in the Revolutionary War.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Lincoln was terrified of that possibility. If the British Navy shows up to break the Union blockade, the Union loses the war. Full stop.
Mhm.
But Britain and France had already abolished slavery. Their general populations hated the institution of slavery.
So if Lincoln makes the war about slavery.
Precisely. If the war is just about preserving the Union, borders and taxes and tariffs, Europe might intervene to get the cotton flowing again. But if the war is a moral crusade against human slavery, Europe cannot intervene without looking like they support human bondage. It completely checkmated the South diplomatically.
But the proclamation itself had some serious fine print, right? It wasn't a blanket, everyone is free now.
Oh, huge fine print. And this is critical to understand. It only freed slaves in the rebelling states. It did not free a single slave in the border states like Kentucky or Maryland that had slavery but had stayed in the Union.
Wait, just to be clear, so if you were enslaved in Maryland in 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation didn't help you.
Correct. It did not apply to you. And that seems incredibly hypocritical to us now. But Lincoln needed those border states to stay loyal. If he freed their slaves, they might secede and join the South. He famously said, "I hope to have God on my side, but I must have Kentucky."
That is the pragmatic politician at work. Moral progress, but calculated. And the timing was calculated, too. He waited for a win to announce it.
He needed Antietam. September 1862. It was the bloodiest single day in American history, 23,000 casualties in one day, but the Union Army stopped the Confederate invasion of the North. It wasn't a total crushing victory, but it was enough. If he had issued the proclamation when they were losing, it would have looked like a desperate scream for help, what he called the last shriek on the retreat. By waiting, he issued it from a position of relative strength.
Let's move to 1863. The tide really starts to turn, but it turns bloody.
This is the era of Ulysses S. Grant. Lincoln finally finds his general. And the reason he likes Grant is simple and brutal. Grant understood the math of the war. He was willing to fight a war of attrition.
They called him the Butcher.
They did. Grant's strategy, in essence, was, I have more men than you. I will engage your army every single day. I will lose 2 men for every one you lose, and I will still win because I can replace my men and you cannot. It was horrific. The Battle of the Wilderness, Cold Harbor, we're talking thousands dying in minutes.
I read that soldiers were pinning their names and addresses onto the backs of their coats before going into battle.
They were. So their bodies could be identified later.
That is chilling, pinning your own name tag on because you know you're just going straight into a meat grinder.
And people in the North were horrified. They demanded Lincoln fire Grant. They said he was a drunk, a butcher, incompetent.
Norm Lincoln's response.
I cannot spare this man. He fights. Lincoln understood that the only way out was through. He had to harden his heart to the daily casualty lists to get to the end of the war.
At the same time, you have Sherman in the South.
William Tecumseh Sherman, his march to the sea. This is the birth of modern total war. Sherman wasn't just fighting armies, he was breaking the will of the Southern people to continue the fight. He marched through Georgia, burning crops, twisting railroad tracks around trees, they called them Sherman's neckties, destroying the South's entire economic capacity to wage war.
It was psychological warfare. The message was, we can go anywhere we want and you can't stop us.
That was exactly the message.
And amidst all this unbelievable carnage, Lincoln goes to a battlefield cemetery in Pennsylvania, Gettysburg.
And this is the contrast that I think defines him. You have the industrial-scale slaughter of the war, the mud and the blood and the amputations. And then you have this 2-minute speech. The featured speaker that day was a man named Edward Everett, a very famous orator. He spoke for 2 hours.
2 hours. I can barely sit through a 20-minute meeting sometimes.
Laughs, right? Lincoln spoke for 2 minutes, less than 300 words.
And in those 2 minutes, he completely reframed the entire point of the country.
He did. He moved the goalposts. Before this, the war was about preserving the Constitution or saving the Union. In the Gettysburg Address, he said it was about a new birth of freedom. He argued that the war was a test of whether democracy, a government of the people, by the people, for the people, could actually survive on Earth. He made the war cosmic. He gave it a global significance.
But even with that incredible speech, by 1864, things look unbelievably bleak. This is the part of the story that really stresses me out every time I read it. He has to run for re-election in the middle of a civil war.
It's the darkest hour of the entire conflict. The casualties under Grant are mounting. The public is exhausted. They just want the killing to stop. The Democrats run George McClellan, The very general Lincoln had fired for being too timid on a peace platform.
And a peace platform basically means what?
It means a negotiated settlement. It essentially means letting the South go and keeping slavery intact.
And Lincoln thinks he's going to lose.
He is convinced of it. His advisors, his cabinet, they all tell him he's going to lose. And this leads to one of the most revealing moments of his entire character. He writes a memorandum, he seals it in an envelope, and he has his cabinet members sign the back of it without reading what's inside.
What did it say?
It was a pledge. He wrote that if he lost the election, he would spend the months between the election and the new president's inauguration working with that new president to save the Union before the transition of power.
Wow.
He knew that once the new guy took over, the war would stop and the Union would die. So he was promising to work frantically to win the war in that lame duck period, to present the winner with a done deal.
That's selfless in a way you rarely see in politics. He was preparing to help the very guy who defeated him, just to save the country.
He was willing to sacrifice his own political future, his ego, everything. But then a miracle happens for the Union.
Sherman takes Atlanta.
The news hits the North like a thunderclap. The Union Army has taken the industrial heart of the South. Suddenly, the war looks winnable again. Public opinion swings almost overnight. Lincoln wins re-election. The mandate is secured.
And we enter the final act. April 1865. Victory.
Lee surrenders to Grant at a small courthouse in Appomattox, Virginia. And you have to look at the terms Grant gives Lee's army. This is so important. He sends the Confederate soldiers home. He lets them keep their horses to plant their spring crops. There were no treason trials for the common soldiers, no mass executions.
Why? Why so generous?
Because of Lincoln. Lincoln's vision for Reconstruction was all there in his second inaugural address a month earlier. With malice toward none, with charity for all. He wanted to heal the wound, not infect it with vengeance and retribution. He wanted the South to come back into the fold.
He wanted to bring the family back together, but there were people who didn't want the family back together. They wanted revenge.
Including John Wilkes Booth.
Let's slow down here. We really need to walk through this moment by moment. This is the pivot where everything changes. April 14th, 1865, Ford's Theater.
It was supposed to be a celebration. The war was effectively over. Lee had surrendered just 5 days before. It was Good Friday. Lincoln and Mary decided to go see a play, a light comedy called Our American Cousin.
The mood in Washington must have been incredible. The weight of 4 years of hundreds of thousands dead finally lifting off his shoulders.
People who saw him that day said he looked happier and more relaxed than he had in years. He was talking about traveling to Europe, maybe to the Holy Land. He was talking about going back to Springfield to practice law. He was looking forward to life after the war.
And Booth is there. Who is this guy? Because I think we picture a shadowy, cloaked assassin, but he was a celebrity, right?
Booth wasn't some unknown drifter. He was one of the most famous actors in America.
Yeah.
He was handsome, charismatic, known by everyone in that theater. It would be like a Hollywood A-lister today committing a political assassination.
And his motive?
He was a fanatical Confederate sympathizer, consumed by hatred for Lincoln.
Oh.
The final straw for him was a speech Lincoln gave just a few days earlier, where he suggested giving voting rights to some black men, particularly those who had served in the Union Army. Booth was in the crowd and said, that is the last speech he will ever make.
So he enters the theater.
He was a famous actor, so he could move around the theater without anyone raising an eyebrow. He goes up to the president's private box. The guard who was supposed to be stationed there had stepped away.
Right.
Maybe for a drink, maybe he was just negligent, we don't know for sure.
Oh, no.
Booth slips into the vestibule behind the box. He jams the door shut with a piece of wood so that no one can follow him in.
And he waits.
He knew the play by heart. He waits for a specific line in the play that was known to always get a big laugh. The line was, "You sockdologizing old man trap." He hoped the roar of the laughter would mask the sound of the gunshot.
The audience laughs.
And Booth steps into the box, raises a small Derringer pistol, and fires. Point-blank range. A single shot to the back of Lincoln's head.
Chaos.
Absolute chaos. Major Henry Rathbone, who was in the box with Lincoln's, tries to grab Booth. Booth drops a pistol and pulls out a large dagger, slashing Rathbone's arm to the bone. Then, in a moment of pure theatricality, Booth leaps from the balcony down to the stage.
That's a pretty big drop.
It's about a 12-foot drop. His boot spur catches on the Treasury Guard flag that was draped over the rail, the American flag. He lands awkwardly and snaps his leg.
Wow.
But adrenaline takes over. He stands up, faces the stunned audience, and shouts, "Sic semper tyrannis," the motto of Virginia, thus always to tyrants.
And the audience, do they know what's happening?
For a split second, some people think it's part of the play. this famous actor making a dramatic entrance. Then Mary Todd screams, and the reality crashes down on everyone.
And Lincoln?
He never regains consciousness. Doctors rush to the box. They carry him across the street to a boarding house, the Peterson House. The bed was too short for his tall frame. They had laid him diagonally across it.
Oh, man.
He labors through the night. The breathing is heavy, difficult. His cabinet gathers, weeping. He dies at 7:22 the next morning. He was 56 years old.
56? That is, honestly, looking at the photographs from 1865, I would have guessed he was 75. The presidency literally ate him alive.
It did. If you look at the life mask that was taken of his face in 1860 versus the one from early 1865, the difference is haunting. The war carved itself into his face. And you have to realize, the night of the assassination, it wasn't just Booth. This was a conspiracy.
Right. We often forget this. It wasn't just one lone wolf.
It was a coordinated terror attack. On the same night, Booth shot Lincoln, another attacker, a former Confederate soldier named Lewis Powell, bluffed his way into the home of Secretary of State William Seward. Seward was at home, in bed, recovering from a terrible carriage accident.
Oh, my God.
Powell brutally stabbed him in the face and neck. It was a complete bloodbath. Seward survived, but barely. His face was scarred for life.
And there was a guy assigned to the vice president, too, wasn't there?
George Atzerodt. He was supposed to kill Vice President Andrew Johnson at his hotel,
Uh-huh.
but he lost his nerve. He went to the hotel bar, got drunk, and just wandered off into the night, his mission abandoned.
So the goal was to completely decapitate the United States government.
Yes. Kill the president, the vice president, the secretary of state, create chaos, give the collapsing Confederacy a chance to rise again from the ashes. It failed to restart the war, but it absolutely succeeded in breaking the peace.
So the war ends, the leader who wanted a gentle peace is dead, and the country is in shock. What happens next?
Disaster. Andrew Johnson, the vice president, takes over. Remember, Lincoln had picked him as his running mate in '64 to balance the ticket. Johnson was a Southern Democrat who had stayed loyal to the Union, but he was a Southern sympathizer at heart.
And he didn't share Lincoln's vision of charity for all.
Or rather, he had too much charity for the former white Confederates and none at all for the newly freed slaves. He completely botched Reconstruction. He allowed the Southern states to enact black codes, which were essentially slavery by another name. He fought against civil rights for African Americans at every turn. It set the country back decades.
And what happened to Mary Todd?
Her life just completely collapsed. She had lost 3 of her 4 sons, and now she had sat there holding her husband's hand as he died. Her mental health, which was already fragile, just deteriorated completely. She was drowned in debt, paranoia, and overwhelming grief. She was eventually committed to an asylum by her own surviving son, Robert. It's a tragedy within a tragedy.
We have to address the complicated truth here. We call Lincoln the great emancipator. We build these huge marble statues. But looking at the sources, his personal views on race weren't exactly modern.
No, and we have to be honest about that. Lincoln was a man of the 19th century. In his debates with Douglas, he stated very clearly that he did not believe in or argue for full social and political equality between the white and black races. He used language that would be shocking and completely unacceptable today.
And the civil liberties stuff, suspending habeas corpus, that's a big deal.
He locked up thousands of people without trial. He shut down newspapers that criticized the war effort. He stretched the powers of the Constitution to its absolute breaking point, and maybe beyond. He was a pragmatic, sometimes ruthless politician, not a plaster saint.
Well, there's a but, right.
But he had the capacity to grow. That's the key. He started the war simply to save the Union. He ended it to bring about a new birth of freedom. He started with a position of no expansion of slavery, and by the end of his life, he was advocating for black voting rights, the very thing that got him killed. He was moving, evolving in the right direction, and he dragged a reluctant country along with him.
So what does this all mean? Why does this story still matter so much to someone listening right now, maybe halfway across the world?
Because it's the ultimate test case for democracy. Lincoln proved that a free society can endure its worst nightmare itself and survive. He showed that leadership isn't about perfection, it's about endurance. It's about making the agonizing choice when there are no good options on the table.
And the legacy isn't just the monuments, it's tangible.
No, it's very real. It's the 13th Amendment ending slavery. It's the stability of the American experiment, which was not a given. It's the industrial superpower that America became, a transformation that started with Lincoln's war economy.
Here's a final thought for you to chew on. In a way, Lincoln normalized the struggle. He carried the grief of an entire nation on his shoulders while battling his own clinical depression, his own doubts, and his own long list of failures. He didn't hide the cracks, he led right through them.
He showed us that you don't have to be made of stone to be strong. You can be broken, you can be sad, you can be unsure, and you can still save the world.
We want to hear from you. What part of this story hit you the hardest? Was it the dirt floor cabin, the sealed memo, the final moments at Ford's Theater? Let us know.
It's a story that never, ever stops teaching us.
This has been The Deep Dive. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.